A Mexican icon and their country's most famous painter, he was a larger-than-life man who took on big ideas on a large scale, even being born with the extremely long name Diego Medina de la Concepción Juan Nepomuceno Estanislao de la Rivera y Barrientos Acosta y Rodriguez, thankfully shortened to Diego Rivera.
Alright!
He is best known for his large size, his marriage to fellow artist Frida Kahlo, and his mural paintings, which he helped to establish as an icon of Mexican art. Diego Rivera was born on December 8, 1886 in Guanajuato, Mexico, along with a twin brother, Carlos. His brother died at the age of 2, which haunted Diego throughout his lifetime. His parents both worked as school teachers, and his father also worked as the editor for a liberal newspaper, which would spark Diego's later interest in politics. At around age 2 or 3, Diego began drawing. His earliest work covered the walls and furniture of the family's house, which prompted his parents to set up a room for him that was covered in blackboard. In 1891, Diego's sister Maria was born, and shortly after, the family moved to Mexico City. At the age of 10, Diego took night classes at the San Carlos Academy of Fine Arts, before transferring there full-time. There were many inspirational teachers at San Carlos, but Diego's biggest influence came from a local engraver named José Guadalupe Posada, who owned a shop near the school. Posada sold prints of his engravings for a low enough price that anyone could buy them, making his work accessible to everyone. In 1906, Diego graduated with honors, but wanted to continue studying art in Europe. Using his father's political connections, they traveled to Veracruz to visit the governor. Governor Teodoro de Asa was impressed with Diego's work and agreed to sponsor his continued studies in Europe. In 1907, Diego arrived in Madrid, Spain, and worked in the studio of Spanish painter Eduardo Chicaro. During his stay, he discovered the works of Spanish Renaissance artists and also began to develop his own technique. After 2 years, he moved to Paris, where he discovered the works of Impressionists and Post-Impressionist artists. In the following summer, he visited Bruges, Belgium, to study Flemish artists, painting The House on the Bridge in 1909. Later that year, he returned to Mexico for President Porfirio Diaz's political Mexican art exhibition, where he exhibited over 40 of his works. Although there is no connection to Diego, there were plans to overthrow President Diaz happening during this time, plans that would start the Mexican Revolution the following month.
This revolution has been a huge success. Yay us!
Diego returned to Paris, where he reconnected with fellow artist Angelina Balaf, whom he had met on his trip to Belgium, and the two began living together in 1911. A group of friends that Diego met in Paris were experimenting with an art style known as Cubism. Cubism is defined by its use of multiple viewpoints of a single object, allowing the viewer to see subjects from different angles at the same time. Leading the movement were artists Pablo Picasso and George Braque. Diego's work began to show elements of Cubism, and by 1913 his work had shifted entirely to this style. In 1916, Diego and Angelina had their first child. The child, named Diego, was born with health issues and died the following year. While Angelina was pregnant, Diego began an affair with Russian artist Marie Marevna Vorobiev-Stabelska, who would give him a daughter named Marika 4 years later. His painting, Motherhood Angelina and the Child Diego, shows Angelina breastfeeding their son Diego. Unlike the monochromatic colors seen by other Cubism artists, Diego uses bright, vivid colors in his work. His work in Cubism was short-lived and came to an end in 1917 after some disagreements within the movement. Following Cubism, his work reflected the influences of post-impressionist painters Henri Rousseau and Paul Cézanne. In 1919, fellow Mexican artist David Siqueiros was living in Paris when he met Diego. Siqueiros filled Diego in on the current state of Mexico and politics. The two shared the same political ideas and were also interested in expressing their ideas with art that could be viewed by everyone. The two set off to Italy, where they studied art together for the next 17 months. They were particularly interested in Italian Renaissance-era fresco paintings, which are a type of painting done in wet plaster where the pigment becomes part of the wall. The most famous example of this technique is the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, done by Michelangelo. Diego and Siqueiros decided that large fresco-style mural paintings were the future of art in Mexico.
Future's now, old man.
In 1921, Diego returned to Mexico, where José Vasconcelos had recently become the Minister of Education. Vasconcelos made major changes to the school system in Mexico, including a requirement to include art classes. He invited Diego, along with a group of artists, to the Yucatan Peninsula, where they saw ancient Mayan ruins. This trip also inspired his lifelong collection of pre-Columbian or ancient Mexican artifacts. During the trip, Diego shared his idea of creating public murals with Vasconcelos. He liked the idea and made arrangements for the first one. Diego's first mural project was called The Creation, created in the Bolivar Amphitheater at the National Preparatory School. With the inspiration taken from Italian fresco painters, Diego blended his own Cubism and Post-Impressionism styles with Aztec designs. During his time at the National Preparatory School, he first met Frida Kahlo, who was, at the time, a 15-year-old student who admired his work. Later the same year, Diego met and married his first wife, Guadalupe Medin. In 1922, along with other artists including David Siqueiros and José Clemente Orozco, Diego helped to form the Syndicate of Technical Workers, Painters, and Sculptors, who focused on creating public artwork. In addition to artistic ideas, the group also shared many of the same political ideas, which were largely communist. Diego's second mural project was at the Ministry of Education, which was a huge endeavor and required many assistants. The murals here focused more on working-class people and the beauty of Mexico. He also took on another set of murals during this time at the Agricultural School of Chapingo. In 1924, his daughter Guadalupe was born, and in 1927, his second daughter, Ruth, was born. That year, he left his wife and 2 children after being invited to Russia to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. He was commissioned to do a mural for the Red Army Club in Moscow, but had many challenges and disagreements with the Soviet regime. Before work was finished on the mural, Diego was asked to leave the country for what they claimed to be anti-Stalin activities. After returning to Mexico, he was expelled from the Communist Party.
Sometimes life just isn't fair, kiddo.
In 1928, he was commissioned to do a series of murals at the Palace of Cortes in Cuernavaca, which would become some of his most admired works. The same year, he reconnected with Frida Kahlo, who was 21 by that time and featured her in a mural called The Arsenal, along with fellow artist David Siqueiros. Shortly after reconnecting, Diego and Frida started a relationship and were married in Coyoacán, Mexico. At the time of the marriage, Diego was 42 and Frida was 22. The two shared a mutual love and admiration for each other's work, and also shared the same political views, but their relationship was volatile, with multiple affairs on both sides. By 1930, people with communist ideas in Mexico were being attacked and suppressed by the Mexican government. Frida and Diego were fearful of what might happen to them after seeing people close to them being jailed and deported. They decided to leave Mexico and travel to the United States, where a group had previously tried to commission Diego for a mural. They arrived in San Francisco, where Diego painted murals for the San Francisco Stock Exchange and the California School of Fine Art. The following year, the Museum of Modern Art in New York held a retrospective exhibit of Diego's work, which at the time was only the second time that a single artist was featured. The exhibit set attendance records for the museum, with more than 57,000 spectators. Following the retrospective in New York, his next commission was in Detroit, Michigan at the interior courtyard of the Detroit Institute of Arts. The Detroit industry murals were not well received when they were unveiled in 1933. Many people were angry that a communist from Mexico had been hired instead of a local artist, especially at the height of the Great Depression. Despite the criticism, though, the murals are considered some of his best work today, and are praised for their accurate depiction of laborers. In 1933, Diego received a commission from the Rockefeller family to paint a mural for Rockefeller Center in New York City. After showing rough sketches of the mural to the project director, Diego began painting. The mural that was painted was different from initial drawings, in that it featured the former leader of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin. Despite protest from the public, the press, and the director, Diego refused to remove Lenin from the painting. He was prevented from finishing the mural, but still paid in full. The mural was hidden from the public and later destroyed. Before this happened, though, one of Diego's assistants had secretly taken photos of the mural, and in 1934 it was recreated, this time with a different name: Man, Controller of the Universe. A month after the Rockefeller mural was destroyed, he worked on a series of murals for the New Workers' School, as well as 2 small panels for the headquarters of the New York Trotskyites. Another commission from the World's Fair in Chicago was canceled by representatives after hearing about the negative publicity in New York. Diego enjoyed life in New York City and felt that living in such a place was the best place to push his political message. Frida, however, had grown homesick, and the two returned to Mexico at the end of the year. While in the United States, the couple had a house built by their friend, architect and artist Juan O'Gorman in San Angel, Mexico. The house, known as the Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo studio home, featured studios for both Diego and Frida that were connected by a bridge. Shortly after moving into their new home, Diego began an affair with Frida's youngest sister, Cristina, which devastated Frida. She chopped off her hair and stopped wearing the traditional Mexican clothing that she had become known for. In 1935, Diego completed work on an iconic mural called The History of Mexico, which he had started painting 6 years earlier. The work shows the history of the Mexican people and the fight against the Spanish, the French, and the dictators that controlled the country throughout its history. The following year, he received a commission for a mural at the Hotel Reforma in Mexico City. There was disagreement on the work that he did, and the mural was altered without Diego's approval. This resulted in a lawsuit that he later won and was later allowed to restore the work. In 1937, political icon Leon Trotsky and his wife Natalia came to Mexico seeking political asylum from the Stalin regime of the Soviet Union. Diego had supported the Trotskys years earlier and welcomed them into the Blue House in Coyoacán, where they stayed for the next couple of years. Frida had a brief affair with Leon Trotsky, and the Trotskys eventually moved out after political and personal disagreements. Although Frida and Diego had both had numerous affairs over the years, Diego's affair with Cristina and Frida's affair with Trotsky were the most devastating. It's unclear exactly what caused it, but the couple divorced in 1939. Much like their marriage, their divorce was unconventional. Their lives were still mostly spent together, and they saw each other frequently. The next year, Diego received a mural commission in San Francisco at the Golden Gate International Exposition of 1940 that was painted in front of a live audience. During the exhibit, Frida arrived in San Francisco to reconcile, and the two were remarried while there. Also during this time, Diego received news that Leon Trotsky had been assassinated. After returning home, they both lived at the house in Coyoacán, where Diego began construction on the Anahuacayi Museum, which was an Aztec-style pyramid that would house his personal collection of around 60,000 pieces of pre-Columbian art and artifacts. Diego began teaching painting and composition classes at La Esmeralda in 1943 along with Frida. While working as a teacher, he also created numerous murals, including one of his most famous works at the Hotel de Prado. The mural, called Dream of a Sunday Afternoon, included over 150 figures. In the mural, he depicted Mexican politician and writer Ignacio Ramirez holding a sign which read, "God does not exist," which sparked outrage, and the mural was covered up. Eventually, he removed the words, and the mural was displayed 9 years later. In 1949, Diego's first retrospective exhibit in Mexico was held at the Palace of Fine Arts, which showed off more than 1,000 of his works from his 50-year career. Diego made many attempts to return to the Communist Party, but was rejected because of his ties with the Trotskys and work considered anti-Stalin. In 1952, he was asked to create a piece for the Mexican exhibition in Paris. The piece that he created was a pro-Stalin and anti-Western propaganda piece. Mexico refused to exhibit it, and the work created controversy in Paris. 2 years later, he was finally reaccepted to the Communist Party. In 1954, after years of declining health, his wife, Frida Kahlo, died from a pulmonary embolism. He married his art dealer, Emma Hurtado, the following year. In the 1950s, Diego's health was also declining, and in 1955 he was diagnosed with cancer. Since he was now accepted by the Communist Party, he made his second trip to Russia soon after, where he sought cancer treatment at Moscow's Botkin Hospital. Doctors in Moscow were unable to do anything for him. and on November 24, 1957, he died of heart failure in a San Angel studio in Mexico City. Diego's last painting was a still life called The Watermelons, which was similar to Frida's last painting 3 years earlier, called Viva la Vida. Diego also left behind several works that he was unable to complete, including a mural for the Faculty of Chemical Sciences at Mexico's National Autonomous University. Diego and Frida's childhood homes are now both museums in Mexico. Anahuacaí was completed in 1964 and given to the people of Mexico. An inscription inside the museum reads, "I return to the people the artistic heritage I was able to redeem from their ancestors." Diego's publicly displayed artwork put focus on working-class people. This idea inspired President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to enact the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project in 1935 that provided work to hundreds of artists. What do you think about Diego Rivera and his use of large public murals? Or any of his other work? Do you find him or his work controversial? Let me know any thoughts you have in the comments. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider supporting this channel by liking and subscribing.